Welcome back. This morning, we're giving a voice to victims as the man convicted of killing 20-year-old nursing student Holly Bobo continues his fight for a new trial. Bobo's family has to now relive the trauma of her murder all over again with this big hearing. She went missing back in 2011 in rural Tennessee. Her remains not found until 3 years later. Zachary Adams was convicted of killing Bobo. He went to a jury trial. And one of his co-defendants, a guy named Jason Autry, testified against him, but has now recanted what he said about him and his role in the homicide. So now Adams is really hanging his hat on that and pushing for a new trial. On Wednesday, his former attorney told the court that based on co-defendant Jason Autry's statements, he thought that Adams would be found guilty of Bobo's murder.
Attorney-client privilege is waived in this case. So I'm going to ask you, did Zach Adams ever tell you, Mr. Simmons, I committed this crime?
Zachary Adams never told me or suggested to me that he committed the crime.
Did you ever ask him?
Not directly.
You had tried to talk Zach into pleading guilty.
I had given him my professional opinion as to the outcome of the trial.
Which was?
He would be found guilty unless Mr. Autry's testimony was rebutted. And that was my opinion. And given that, he needed to consider a resolution of the case, and he was very adamant that he was not going to plead guilty. As I understood the facts of the case at the time, I thought it very likely a jury would convict him. And either convicted, I thought it also very likely he would get a sentence of death. Now, given those facts, I think he had to consider what his options were. I did not tell him he had to plead guilty, no.
Wow, so we're talking about a capital case here. You know, this was so long ago, I didn't recall that. I just recall that this was such a huge case for the true crime community, something that seemed to shock so many people. It was hard to understand why anybody would want to harm this beautiful young lady. And now her family has the potential of seeing some of the justice undone. And did Zachary Adams' former attorney's actions help with this? Here we are, this push for a new trial. The legal term is post-conviction relief. That's what's technically going on here. Let's bring in our guest to break it all down, the chief of police at Talladega College and attorney John Phillips. Chief Chris Anderson, let me begin with you. What a mess this is with these people. I mean, you have guys that seem like really bad guys. One of them who seems like a terrible liar. How do you as an investigator over so many years, how would you begin to tackle this if you were involved in trying to sort out if this man is really innocent and was put away for something he didn't do?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there, and I'll try to do it as quickly as possible. You know, I've had cases, you know, of course I've worked homicide cases, but I've also worked on some post-conviction cases with reasonable doubt and beyond that. So when you have a case where a person is claiming that they were wrongfully convicted, as an investigator, you have to go back to the beginning of your case. Because all defendants in any case where they believe that what they're saying that they're innocent, they utilize, most of the time they utilize the same verbiage. You know, I had ineffective witnesses and you know, the witnesses, ineffective defense counsel. And then you have some that will say, hey, my co-defendants are recanting their statements. That's with every case. But there's a lot that goes in conjunction with this conviction. There's a lot of admissions. There are a couple of confessions, if quote unquote, if you will. As an investigator, you're required to go back and look at that information, especially if you're an investigator that's bringing in fresh eyes to this case. Go back, look and see how the original testimony was given. Look at the original statements and see how they mesh up with the physical evidence in this case. There's not a lot of physical evidence in this case. It's all circumstantial, but Circumstantial evidence is evidence. And you have to look at it all when you are talking about giving some relief to a person that's been convicted. And I must mention this. I hate it for the victims in this case. The victim's family in this case. You know, they have to go through this entire ordeal again after they've not only gone through the investigation, gone through finding the remains of their daughter, and listening to this person that's on the witness stand talk about how their daughter was murdered. And then this is reopening just that box that maybe somehow they were able to put away after years and knowing that the person that was responsible was convicted.
Chief, beautifully said. Thank you for that in such helpful insight. We don't know that we can trust what these guys are saying. These guys that are, you know, they're criminals. They either pleaded or were convicted, criminals, and we're supposed to believe this. I love what you were saying about how a lot of times the criminals will use the same verbiage, the same kind of things, the same arguments. And John Phillips, the one criminal we're not going to hear from is Zachary Adams. Apparently, his lawyer representing him in this process has advised him, not a good idea to talk. They've conveyed to the court he's not going to be testifying. Smart move, counselor? What do you say?
Yeah, you keep the Fifth Amendment as long as you possibly can, because there's this process, there's another trial, there's a possibility for, because this is capital, other crimes, recharging, not under double jeopardy, but certainly some other similar, issues tied to this. That's what I would recommend. This one's fascinating because, like in Joe Exotic's case, or in some of the cases we have nationally where there was a movement, there was a reason why facts needed to be looked at again, and reason I wrote a 300-page motion for a new trial in Joe Exotic's case showing different evidence. But but here it's just really based on a few new findings of evidence, but it's pretty important. Perjury is perjury.
Sure. Great points, John. Let me show you both another clip from this hearing this week. A retired TBI agent, this case happening in Tennessee, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. His name is Joe Walker. He took the stand. Let's take a listen to some of what he said.
If there is evidence that cannot be manipulated, that Zach Adams was not a part of this crime, you want him out of jail, don't you?
If Zach Adams was in jail unnecessarily, sir, I couldn't sleep at night. I can promise you that.
Okay. Chief Anderson, what do you think about that retired agent's statement there?
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that portion of his statement. Yeah. No human being, and no police officer, no investigator who believes in the oath and creed that you took as a law enforcement officer wants to see a person who's been wrongfully convicted in prison. Nobody wants. That's not justice. Justice is seeing the right person convicted of the crime in which they committed and having the evidence to prove such. So, yeah, I absolutely agree with what he's saying, and kudos to him for saying so. There are some other issues that I have with some of the investigators in this case, but, yeah, I absolutely agree with that statement.
Thank you, Chief. I feel like I'd be remiss to not follow up. What issues, if you can share briefly, did you think it was a shoddy investigation or?
Sure. There was an original investigator on this case who saw or believed that there was another person who he was investigating in reference to this case was involved in the murder. He never believed that the defendant or the defendants in this case were the ones who actually committed the murder. So as I researched his investigation during this case, it appears to me that he had tunnel vision throughout the entire investigation. So his credibility, his information that he issued, I just have a problem with it, because one thing that you can't have as an investigator is tunnel vision. That's where wrongful convictions happen.
You're right, Chief. Yeah, the man you're talking about, Terry Britt, was that suspect. He was a sex offender, and he was said to be in the area at the time of Holly Bobo's murder. We know that there was a sexual assault done on Holly Bobo as part of this heinous crime and her murder. And so, yeah, you're right, never charged, and certainly a cloud of suspicion that was there at one point around this guy. We'll have to leave it there for now, but I know we'll continue talking about this, and we don't expect a decision anytime soon, so it gives us more time for analysis. We have to let you go. Chief Chris Anderson, always a pleasure to have your expertise. Thank you so much. Attorney John Phillips, thank you for your insight and expertise every Thursday morning. We get to see you, so we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Still to come here on Opening Statements, we're going to talk more about the Diddy case, but as we go to break, we want to take a moment to remember the victim in this case, nursing student Holly Bobo. This beautiful young lady had such a bright future ahead of her. She wanted to devote her career to helping care for other people. She was 20 years old, vivacious, beloved, had a beautiful spirit, and her family misses her dearly. We haven't forgotten about her here at Court TV. We'll be right back.